In recent years, most of the Intercity 125 or high-speed trains have sadly been withdrawn from top-line use, either to be replaced by the controversial Class 800 units, or live on to perform short hop services, such as the Castle and Inter-7 city trains. Meanwhile, one set, made up from power cars dubbed Pip and Emma, have come to reside on the island of Sodor on the North Western Railway. Despite replacing Gordon on this assignment, the large blue engine had matured to the point where he accepted them as one of the family, and would still be used in a semi-fast capacity, whilst Pip and Emma would bring a new era to the Express. The North Western Railway is one of few places on Earth to retain steam in frontline roles in the post-war era and into the new millennium, with the most important frequent service being the Wild Nor'Wester, nicknamed the Express, which began life in 1926 and travels between Tidmouth and Vicarstown, covering 87 miles in roughly 2 hours, with the most used engine on this service being Gordon the Big Engine, the prototype for Sir Nigel Gresley's A1 class Pacifics. Other engines that helped for the Express include James the Red Engine, and the locomotive that was originally assigned to the role, Henry the Green Engine, who initially started life as a hybrid between the then proposed A1 and the C1 Atlantics, before his ultimate rebuild into a Black 5. Following World War II and the nationalisation of the railways in 1948, the North Western Railway would become the North West Division of the newly formed British Railways. Despite the increasing presence of car and bus travel, the island wouldn't be too affected, as since the publishing of their first book, The Three Railway Engines by Reverend Wilbert Awdry, passenger numbers remained more or less the same, particularly in the tourist market, with Sodor's small size meaning there wasn't enough space for multiple airlines to be properly established, and Gordon would maintain his role, having gone through many repairs and overhauls to keep up reliability. Meanwhile, the numbers for the larger British railways, known as the other railway to the Fat Controller's engines, were opposite to the NWR, as they were suffering heavily from domestic air and road travel. Despite the unfortunate mass withdrawal and scrapping of steam engines, and rush building of diesels that came from the modernisation plan of 1955, this still wasn't enough to win passengers off the airlines, with many of the diesels brought over to take over the work of their more alive predecessors being plagued with reliability issues, and many of these would suffer the same fate as the steam engines they replaced, with some of these being Boco, a Metropolitan Vickers Class 28, Bear, a Class 35 Hymec, and Derrick, a Class 17 Clayton, thankfully avoiding this fate as they would end up on Sodor. Among the other failures from this plan was arguably the precursor to the HST, the 5 Blue Pullman 6-8 car diesel sets, which were built between 1959 and 1960, and initially worked the Western Pullman out of London Paddington and the Midland Pullman out of London St Pancras, although due to various reasons, including poor management and the launch of their replacement, the electrically hauled Manchester Pullman out of London Euston in 1966 following electrification of the West Coast Main Line, these unique train sets unfortunately weren't a major success, leading to their official withdrawals in May 1973 and scrapping between 1974 and 1975. Prior to the Blue Pullman's withdrawal from service, the other railway developed the Advanced Passenger Train, or APT, an experimental tilting train that relied on hydraulics and mechanical arms, as opposed to the passive systems used on the UAC Turbo Train of Canada and the Talgo Pendulum coaches of Spain, and was first fitted with gas turbine power plants before later being swapped to overhead electric wires as a result of the 1973 oil crisis. However, due to delays in the project, a stopgap was needed to win passengers off the airlines, which would lead to the construction and testing of the prototype high-speed train, or HST, which was designed by the now late Sir Kenneth Grange. The prototype HST was first trialled on the East Coast Main Line out of London King's Cross, before heading to the Great Western Main Line out of London Paddington to undertake a short passenger career. Following this, production HST sets would be put together and enter service on the Great Western Main Line, and it was in 1977 that Philippa, or Pip for short, and Emma would finally roll out of crew works and begin their careers with British Rail. The two power cars would soon settle into their new routines running on the Great Western Main Line, where they, like their siblings, would replace loco-hauled expresses handled by the unique Class 52 Westerns and the controversial Class 50 Hoovers. But it was during their early years things would go off the rails, where during one run, Pip's cooling system failed, which caused her engine to overheat. On another notable run, Emma's coupling broke when they were ascending a hill, though she would be brought to the rest of the train by Gordon's brother, Flying Scotsman. In 1977, around the same time Pip and Emma were built, and with the success of the HSTs in the West, some sets began entering service on the East Coast Main Line to replace the complex but powerful Class 55 Deltics. As such, Pip and Emma would be two of several power cars allocated to the eastern region in 1978, whilst most of the others were new builds, and this would be their stomping grounds for the next few decades, working trains between London, the Scottish capital of Edinburgh, and occasionally Vicarstown on Sodor, such as the Flying Scotsman Express, the Highland Chieftain, and the Aberdonian, the last of which is now known as the Northern Lights. As was the case with the rest of their family, Pip and Emma became saviours to British Rail, as they made many towns along the routes they served into regular commuter towns for London, whilst for the APT, the trio of production Class 370 units, built between 1977 and 1980, would tragically become the opposite, as due to various government and management issues, and the infamous Queasy Rider headline as a result of a rushed entry into service, among others, they would all be withdrawn by 1986, and leave the rescue of the other railway in the buffers of the HSTs, whilst luckily half-set 370-003 and 6 would be preserved at the Crew Heritage Centre, and tilting trains would return to the mainland in the 2000s with the Class 390 Pendolino units of Virgin Trains. In 1991, the electrification of the East Coast Main Line was finally completed, this being complemented by the scaled-down APT, the Intercity 225 sets, made up of Class 91 electric locomotives, hauling Mark IV coaches and driving van trailers in a push-pull layout, and Pip and Emma would be allocated with several of their siblings to diesel-hauled expresses to non-electrified routes in Scotland, to Inverness and Aberdeen, and again with occasions to Vicarstown. Though during testing of the Class 91s, and in a bid to cover the delay for Mark IVs, they didn't become two of the 9 Class 43s and Mark IIIs used in testing the new electrics. In 1996, during the privatisation of British Rail, Pip, Emma, and 19 other Class 43 power cars became part of the newly formed Great North Eastern Railway, or GNER, of the Sea Containers Company based in Bermuda, and would eventually be repainted into the franchise holder's neat-looking midnight blue livery with an orange waistband. It would be during this time that the pair would see a variety of traction used on the East Coast Main Line, along with their siblings, including Class 91s, Class 90s, with one of these being painted into GNER's livery, Class 373s on the failed regional Eurostar project, and the one-off Class 89 89001. In 2007, Pip and Emma had their original Paxman Valenta power plants replaced by more reliable MTU 16V 4000 units under Project Mallard. However, due to financial instability of Sea Containers' parent company, not all of their siblings would have these installed under GNER, with the company dissolving in December 2007. Whilst many of their siblings would live on to the short-lived National Express East Coast, Pip and Emma would instead be purchased by open access operator Grand Central for runs between London and Sunderland, and according to them, were the only Class 43 power cars not to sport the front buffer beams that replaced the lower streamlining on their other siblings used for testing the Class 91s and those who'd come under Grand Central's wing, along with the Class 180 units previously used with First Great Western. In 2010, the controller of the North Western Railway, Sir Stephen Topham Hatt, also known as Sir Topham Hatt III, took a holiday to the mainland where he'd encounter Pip and Emma, who he had his eyes on to help Gordon with the Express since 2005. Following a satisfactory run to Sunderland, he inquired regarding the pair working for the North Western Railway, Pip and Emma mentioning that they couldn't say yes fast enough, and the purchase would be finalised in 2011, in addition to upgrades being made to the North Western Main Line trackwork to allow speeds of 125 miles an hour. After hauling one final diagram into London King's Cross, Pip and Emma began their long trek to Sodor, arriving on the island a week later, and upon arrival, they'd be sent to the works for overhaul. This work including repainting back into the nostalgic blue and grey livery, the addition of nameplates, and the railway's initials on their sides. Following a ceremony for Wilbert Audrey, Gordon would gracefully give up his top-line duty to the more modern near 40-year-old HST set. Since arriving on Sodor in 2011, Pip and Emma have had various upgrades to keep up with the times, improve reliability, and even to become more environmentally friendly, such as the replacement of the 70s slam doors with automatic sliding doors on their coaches, the addition of wheelchair ramps to allow disabled access, and, most recently for the power cars, the fitting of hydrogen-powered engines to help reduce the railway's carbon output, with the last of these first trialled on Bear, the Class 35 High Mech, with these two bringing improved schedules to the Express by removing the need for passengers to transfer services at Vicarstown or Barrow and Furness. For the future, a possible scheme has been put forward to retrofit the Mark III coaches with tilting technology to speed up their services in a similar manner to the proposal for the Intercity 225 sets, but will instead use the Pendolino system used on the Class 390s, with this still being at the concept stage as of 2024. To summarise, Pip and Emma, as the sole HST to be run directly by the North Western Railway, have now outlived their siblings on their crack expresses from Tidmouth to Vicarstown, and though Gordon has been displaced, his legacy still lives on with the present-day semi-fast express running to Vicarstown, and these two Class 43s have continued living on to be really useful engines, and rightfully putting the Class 800s to absolute shame.